I used lucid dreaming to actually improve at rock climbing. Like I would visualize the routes and it would build my confidence, and I would no longer, be worried about, oh, can I trust this foothold? Can I trust this handhold? I would just kind of do it pretty quickly, after just a few weeks of trying that in a lucid dream, it had a big difference. And there is actually some science behind that. I think there's a couple of studies at least where they show that it does objectively make a difference, like if you practice something in a dream, especially physical things like martial arts, climbing, movements, if you're an athlete, if you do sports.
There was a study about a ski team that was doing it, and also a gymnastics team. It's like visualization, but full VR, immersion, because you're doing it in your dream, you're feeling the consequences of falling over, and your brain still registers those neural pathways of doing it. So yeah, I've always found that super fascinating. Today's episode is a conversation with Steph, who's the founder of howtolucid.com and a really popular lucid dreaming creator and influencer on YouTube. Today's conversation is about just some of the amazing things you can do with lucid dreaming and some things to look out for. So let's get into it and talk to some experts.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on. It's really good to be here. So yeah, my name's Steph, and I run howtolucid.com, or Lucid Dreaming Experience, on YouTube. And really, I got into lucid dreaming pretty much by accident. It was such a weird thing. Like, I was misbehaving as a child, and I got sent to my room, and there were these two bunk beds, right? So I was on top one, and I just had to pass the time because I wasn't allowed to go on games consoles or screens. That was the punishment. And so what I ended up doing is had all this energy. I was young, but I couldn't really do anything with it. I wasn't allowed out of the room. I couldn't go on my devices and stuff. So I just ended up sleeping. I had a nap, and then I just randomly woke up in the dream. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. I thought I didn't know what was really going on. But later on, I found out that was actually a lucid dream. Pretty much since then, I just had it in the back of my mind. Like, made me really curious, but I didn't really know what it was. I didn't understand it. And then there was a number of films, Inception was one of them, but there was a number of films that kind of made me want to look back into it again. So I did that. And basically over the years, it's just been started out as just a hobby and a passion, really. And then at some point I decided to teach what I knew, because I was, learning quite a lot about it. And hence the YouTube channel, and then the website, and then the books and things like that. But yeah, really, it's just one of my passions. I've always loved the mind, psychology, reality, like figuring out how things work and researching and looking into things. So lucid dreaming was just a part of that for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I relate to that a lot, because I've been lucid dreaming for a long time too, and like the psychology behind it has always really fascinated me. So yeah, that's super cool. What have you found, in terms of all the techniques out there? What have you found is kind of your best advice for people trying to get into it and overwhelmed with all these techniques and ways to do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of, especially beginners, can get kind of too focused on techniques, and they'll try and follow these step-by-step tutorials, whether it's wild or wake back to bed. And it's not ideal for a few reasons. Firstly, it's it's very easy to get the technique wrong, especially if you don't know what it's supposed to feel like. And I mean specifically with the wild, when you go through the vibrational stage and you see the hypnagogia, it's very difficult to do that as a beginner, especially the first time. Once you've done it a few times, then of course you know what you're aiming for, you know what it's supposed to feel like and everything. But for a beginner, I would just say that's just not the best way to have your first lucid dream, in my opinion. I mean, the best way I would say would be a combination of intention, affirmations, randomly interrupting your sleep. I know this is not ideal long term. That's why I say in my videos, I say it's not a long term technique. It's not a sustainable one. But if you do something literally just set an alarm to go off every 14 minutes or something really random like that, and you're going to sleep terribly. You're not going to get great sleep. You're going to be tired the next day, but you will dream. Well, everyone dreams. What I mean is you will remember your dreams, and it's highly likely that you're going to become lucid, because when you chop your sleep up like that, when you go back to sleep, I mean, that's an entire technique on itself, right? The wake back to bed. But when you do it like that, it's highly likely that you're going to remember the dream and become lucid, because you're in that in-between stage, and it's just going to chop up your REM sleep. But you'll feel terrible the next day. So it's what I call an emergency technique. If you're just, let's say the average listener has not had a lucid dream and they just want to have that first experience, to know what it's actually like, then I would recommend doing almost kind of a shotgun approach. You chop up your REM sleep with an alarm. You spend the day going through affirmations and really like setting that strong intention to do it. You flood yourself with inspiration, whether that's like listening to podcasts like this, watching movies, superhero movies, or something like that to give them inspiration. Just kind of plant the seeds in their mind. Yeah, and then of course meditation is important, but again, for a beginner, it's quite difficult to jump into meditation and start doing that when you've never done it before. Whereas everyone can set an alarm on their phone and everyone can watch a movie. So that's why, that's my recommendation for complete beginners.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's some pretty solid advice, honestly. And what about like the more advanced stuff? So once you do become lucid, which, you have done a lot, I'm sure, what do you like use that space for? What do you do? Is it just fun? Is it like spiritual stuff? Like what have you found among all the possibilities that work best for you and also that you recommend people to try out?
Me personally, I like to use it for really abstract, unusual things. At first, I would just like fly around. Like, I'm sure you would do the same, or anyone would do the same, right? It's fun to fly around, and I do that sometimes. But these days, I tend to focus on really trying to dive into my subconscious mind, talk to the different aspects of it, identify like different character parts, different parts of personality, different whatever it is, like shadow work, different fears, the kind of the shadow, darker side of stuff. And then I also like to just use it as like a kind of simulation space where I just kind of simulate things like non-linear time, or what it's like to be a different animal, or these weird kind of things, things that you could never do in waking life, obviously.
Yeah, that's super cool. So, I mean, if you're open to sharing, like, what does that look like in action? So, like, some of the shadow work stuff and like the deep subconscious dive stuff, like when you're lucid in a dream, like, what kind of stuff do you do in order to like explore that deeper? Is it like talking to dream characters, or like, what does that look like in action?
Yeah, so it could be, let's say if it's a fear, for example, you would become lucid. And then usually it's like if someone has a recurring dream, like a recurring dream sign or a nightmare or something, let's say they're always being chased by a dog. I used to always have this dream. What you would do is you would become lucid. You would literally turn to the dog and ask it what it represents. Like, ask the dog, why are you here? Why do I keep having nightmares about you, essentially? And more often than not, the dog will actually tell you, either directly or indirectly. It might lead you to something, like a different part of the dream scene or a person, and then that's the answer. Or it might just directly talk to you. Sometimes that happens. But really, it's just a mixture of direct and indirect communication, Like, it could be something which you only understand when you wake up. And this is why it's really important to, obviously keep a dream journal, interpret it after you've had the dream. But it could also be literally direct. Like, the dog could literally say, you keep having dreams about me because you have a fear of the unknown or something. And then you would then be able to work on that and revisit that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I found that like with certain dream tasks, it takes a lot of time sometimes. And even for beginners, like it's not like just because you try something one night, you're bound to succeed, or get the right answer from something. Sometimes it can take a lot of times of trying to, work on a specific task when you're lucid or get a specific answer. And I like what you said about writing your dreams down is so important, because sometimes the analysis comes later on with more understanding, things click later on. Sometimes other dreams offer, more perspective. So yeah, I think it's a good way to put it, that it's like an ongoing like analysis. I guess we can talk about some of the like deeper questions that a lot of people kind of have when it comes to dreaming. A lot of people are kind of on that boundary of like, what is scientifically proven versus like what do we not fully understand about the dream space. I think one of those things being like, what is this space? Is this like a projection of our subconscious? Is this like a shared space that we can kind of multiplayer with people? Like, what are like your thoughts on like the nature of this space that we spend a third of our lives in?
All right. So my opinion on this is obviously my own. It's like subjective. I have done a lot of looking into different things, different aspects of research. So that could mean like metaphysical stuff, looking at quantum mechanics, and also the opinions of people who claim to be channeling, and like different perspectives like this. My honest belief is that I want to start with the waking world, and then I'll talk about the dream world. So in the waking world, I think there's this illusion that everything is separate. There's this illusion that if someone's in Australia and another person is in Italy, they're completely disconnected and physically in a different place. And I think that's the main problem, because I disagree with that. I think at the quantum level, everything is literally connected. Every atom is connected to every other atom. And every person, every projection of consciousness is already connected. So when people say like, oh, do you think shared dreaming is possible? Well, yes, of course, because in waking life, things are already connected anyway, in my opinion. So then in a dream, it's the same thing. It's not like the dream is this separate simulation. It's all a simulation. It's literally all a bioelectrical simulation in which we're all connected to every other part of the simulation, like a hologram. That's my opinion. So in terms of dreaming, yeah, of course, I think it's just as possible and real as to have a shared dream as it is to have a telepathic experience with someone in a different country. And there's all kinds of different experiments and stories, testimonials, like people having these accounts of these weird experiences that cannot be explained by science, or at least today's science. But quantum mechanics is an area which is starting to realize this stuff. And, there's all kinds of different people or bodies of work that have gone into this. I don't know if you've read The Divine Matrix, Greg Braden. I can give you an example of the kind of experiment if you want.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I'll try and, after this interview, I'll send you a link to this, because I'm probably going to paraphrase a little bit here. But basically, there was this experiment done where they took DNA from somebody and they separated their DNA from them. And then they physically took their DNA in a little test tube 200 miles away to another lab, right? And then what they did is they emotionally stimulated the guy who they took the DNA from. And 200 miles away at exactly the same time, with no time delay, the DNA electrically responded to the emotional stimulus that they put on the guy 200 miles away. This is impossible according to modern day science, but according to quantum mechanics and the idea that we're all connected to every other part, that's very normal and it can be explained by that. So that's one example of how we're all interconnected. We think things are separate, but they're really not separate at all. It's just an illusion, like a trick.
Yeah, that's super cool. Super fascinating stuff. Like quantum mechanics in general has always blown my mind, with the concept that, everything is all connected, all the people on Earth, and also like in the dream space. Do you think that the dream space is also a shared space with other types of entities, beings, like people that have passed on? Like, do you think that there's like levels to it? Like, in your opinion, how is it all structured?
Yeah, but this is the thing. So my opinion about that is the same as waking life. I think we already share this space, the waking life and the dream, with all kinds of entities, energies, beings. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's something in the range of like we can only perceive a tiny fraction of the signals and information that's actually there already. So an example is you can't see radio waves with the human eye, right? You can't see like infrared, you can't see all this stuff, ultraviolet, but they're still there. For example, you can't see the wind, right? But it's still there. In the same way, I think we already share this space with countless different beings and entities that we have no idea about. And that goes to the dream as well. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff about, the different entities, how they interrelate, the different like planes of existence. And there's this idea that it's like it works in octaves. So in music, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the 8 is the octave. So it's like a repetition of the first one. It just repeats in a cycle. And so there's this idea with dimensional planes that it works like octaves, and they're all occupying the same, I guess you could say, the same space technically, but it's like layers all occupying the same space at the same time. And you see examples of this with like paranormal stuff, with like ghosts, different aspects of the paranormal kind of area where the lines become a bit blurred.
As humans, a lot of people think over rationally, they only want to focus on what they can physically see. That's why I think the the dream world is such a hard concept for people to grasp, but really it's, if you've ever had a lucid dream, which I know you have, like it feels so real and it's like more realistic than real life. We're there conscious the same way we are in waking life. So there's definitely a lot of like similarities there. What are some of your like most inspiring or some of your favorite lucid or dream experiences?
So there's fun experiences, and then there's, I guess, more profound experiences. I like a bit of both. So in terms of fun experiences, obviously flying, I've always loved the idea of flying. Yeah, there's been countless like just flying dreams, exploring, and I used to love the idea of wingsuit diving, which is where you kind of glide like a parachute, but you're gliding more forwards. And so, yeah, I've had many dreams like that where I'm kind of like flying down a mountain and then flying up into space, you know. So yeah, I guess I would say flying is definitely my favorite sensation in a lucid dream. And then I've used it to work on different aspects of myself, like confidence being the main one, but also climbing. I quite like rock climbing. And especially in the beginning, I used lucid dreaming to actually improve at rock climbing. Like I would visualize the routes and it would build my confidence, and I would no longer, you know, be worried about, oh, can I trust this foothold? Can I trust this handhold? I would just kind of do it pretty quickly, you know. After just a few weeks of trying that in a lucid dream, it had a big difference for me. Made a big difference, and so that was fun, you know, rock climbing in a dream because no consequences. So, I can just climb anything. There's been many dreams. They're all kind of on my dream journal, which is like this huge document. But yeah, flying is definitely my favorite sensation. Oh, and telekinesis. Cool. I forgot to say telekinesis.
Nice. Yeah, those are all fun things to do. So you feel like with the practicing rock climbing, you actually got better at rock climbing as a result of doing it in your lucid dreams so often?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, of course, this is subjective, but in my experience, you know, I improved much faster than I was improving before I tried it in a lucid dream. And there is actually some science behind that. I think there's a couple of studies, at least, where they show that it does objectively make a difference. Like if you practice something in a dream, especially physical things like martial arts, climbing, movements, you know, if you're an athlete, if you do sports.
Yeah, for sure. It was a study about a ski team that was doing it and also a gymnastics team. It's literally like practicing the same way visualization kind of works. You know, it's like visualization, but full VR, you know, immersion. Because you're doing it in your dream, you're feeling the consequences of falling over or doing a trick correctly or whatever. And your brain still registers like those neural pathways of doing it. So yeah, I've always found that super fascinating. I've always wondered if you could even like practice a language in your dream. Sometimes I try to practice French and I feel like I'm speaking fluent French, but I guess I'll have to put it into practice to see if it actually works.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, like subliminal learning language.
What about like the scary side of lucid dreaming? A lot of people are kind of put off by that, especially beginners. They're like, oh, I don't want to have sleep paralysis, or I don't like bad dreams and stuff like that. I know a lot of the experts that are listening, they love sleep paralysis, and you know, it's such a cool opportunity for some cool dream experiences. But from your experience, like how do you handle that kind of stuff, like the sleep paralysis and the nightmares? Does that still come up for you a lot?
Well, so I very rarely have, I would say, nightmares these days. But sometimes I intentionally try and have a nightmare. I know that sounds weird. It's kind of exciting sometimes. Because let's say if you lucid dream all the time, you're very much in control of things. You know roughly what's going to happen. You can, like, you know, if something tries to stop your dream storyline, you can just override that with your powers and stuff. But yeah, sometimes I like to induce a nightmare just because it's a change, you know, it's more exciting and more of an adventure. And it kind of reminds me of, there was this interview with, I think it was Alan Watts, where he talks about like, if you were God, eventually, like if you could have any dream you wanted after a few hundred years of having every dream you wanted every night, and being able to control everything, you would eventually want something where you don't have control or where you forget your power. So I really like to play into that idea. Sometimes I just even become lucid actually and intentionally don't control the dream just to see just to kind of experience it more as I don't know what's going to happen next. You know, it's more of an adventure. So yeah, sometimes I induce nightmares. If there was a nightmare where I didn't want it or it was uncomfortable and I wanted to end it, obviously I could. Usually there's been a few like lucid nightmares where I couldn't end it, but I would say 9 times out of 10 I can just end the dream if I want to, or just change it into a lucid dream that's not a nightmare.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. Lucidity is such a good way to like navigate nightmares, because even though it's still scary, you kind of have a sense of control and like calmness knowing that it's just a dream. And I like what you said about how sometimes you just go with it without trying to control the dream. I think a lot of people like forget that sometimes we don't have to control the dream just because we're lucid. Like it's cool sometimes to just be a conscious observer and like see what the dream has to like show you. And like sometimes I do the same thing. Literally like half of the time maybe that I'm lucid, I just like look around, especially if it's a dreamscape that has like a lot of details. I just like observe everything and like read the text, see what kind of gibberish it is, and just take it all in. And I
Mhm.
found that sometimes there's like more meaning to the dream instead of me trying to like exert my ego and do all this stuff. So
If you try and exert too much control, then you miss the messages in the dream, or you change things that your mind was trying to tell you. So yeah, sometimes it's good to just chill out a bit and just go with the flow in the dream, even if you could control it.
yeah, and I've also found that usually doing that makes the dream last longer as well, for me
Yeah,
at
it's
least.
interesting, isn't it?
How often do you lucid dream? Does it? I'm sure it varies, but on average.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it varies massively. Sometimes I'll have like a period where it will be kind of every night, and then other times it will be 2 weeks with nothing, 3 weeks with nothing. It really depends how much I like intend to do it. Sometimes, every day for a while. Other times, 2 or 3 weeks with nothing. I would say on average, maybe once or twice a week these days. I mean, it could be more if I like really, really wanted to, or if I was super consistent with everything. But in my experience, like when you have really profound lucid dreams and they actually like shift something and you have breakthroughs or different realizations, you don't really need that many to really enhance your life. Like, even one a month would be enough to make a significant difference. This idea that you need to lucid dream every single night, I don't think the majority of people need that. Sometimes less is more. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's about quality, not quantity. And for me as well, like I'm kind of the
Mhm.
same. It just depends on, how much I'm thinking about it, how much effort I'm putting into it. And sometimes like when I'm not trying so hard, I end up having really good lucid dreams anyways. As I'm sure you are, I kind of center my business and what I do around dreams. So I'm constantly thinking about them. So I don't necessarily all the time have to do all these techniques back to back to try to have a lucid dream all the time. I just kind of let them happen spontaneously when they do. But I
Mm.
still kind of have like an idea or like a plan of things I want to try and things I want to work on. So that's kind of how like I structure my practice these days.
Do you find that like when you're making content about lucid dreaming, sometimes that distracts you from actually just being in the moment and practicing lucid dreaming?
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes like I get like, yeah, it's kind of overwhelming to like, force myself to think about talking about lucid dreaming topics and making content about techniques and stuff. It kind of takes away from me just being able to just enjoy it and do it naturally. And sometimes I've noticed as well that like the work I do like seeps into my dream in like a stressful way. Like I'll have dreams about like missing meetings and not posting videos or whatever. So yeah, it definitely overlaps. But for the most part, I still enjoy my lucid dreams. I'm just trying to, like you, make content, spread the word, tell people
Mhm.
about how awesome and underrated it is.
What do you think the world would be like if every single person had a lucid dream at the same time and then they woke up?
I've always thought about that. That would be really, really cool. It would be like something would happen in terms of like so many people being consciously aware at one time. I think the energy on the planet would be like outrageous. I don't know. I feel like there's a reason why like it's just not attainable necessarily for everybody to have these high levels of consciousness at once. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe it would be a good thing, but that would be crazy. I don't even know what would happen, honestly. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think it would definitely be good. I don't think it would be a bad thing. But then it would force enormous change, I think, because I think many of the systems that we have in the world today, many of the problems are a result of low consciousness and of people not really thinking and being aware of themselves and what they're doing. So I think if everyone suddenly had awareness, all of these systems that have been built up based around consumerism, capitalism, exploitation, they would have to be dissolved. But then there's nothing really to replace the systems with at the moment. So it would kind of be this chaotic time where, like, let's say if everybody woke up and they realized money is not actually a real thing, it's a made up number, and they inflate the currency away every year until the point where it's worthless. And so then, therefore, you don't actually need to go to work and people stopped paying taxes. Like, it would create a lot of chaos. And until they figure out a better system, I think it could be short term, it could be very chaotic until they figure it out.
A lot of people grow up thinking that working with your dreams is bad or evil or not good for you. And I've always thought of that as another way that they kind of try to not allow us to realize how powerful we are and how highly conscious we are. And, that's kind of what I learned through lucid dreaming, that, there's so much growth for all of us. So I think more mind-blowing than everybody having a lucid dream at the same time would be like this ideal world where people grew up since a young age, which is starting to happen now. Back when we grew up, it wasn't necessarily taught as a normal thing to lucid dream and work with your dreams. Like, a lot of us were having lucid dreams as kids and we didn't even know what it was. So I think it's really cool that this new generation of children, a lot of people are raising their kids to be dreamers and to know what lucid dreaming is and meditation. So at such a young age to be able to just have that conscious awareness, I think that hopefully we're heading to a good place, but it's going to take, like you said, reconstruction and rebuilding.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's lots of different forces, pushing and pulling humanity, some for good and some for bad. So I think, in my opinion, it's always this perfect balance, this perfect duality between could go bad, could go good, but it's always kind of balanced in the middle. So, and I think, in my opinion, it's designed that way so that we have true free will and a free choice. But yeah, that's another rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, the free will rabbit hole is one that also messes my mind up because I don't know if we really do or we don't, because if everything's already set in place, is that even free will? I don't really know. I'm still very confused by that question. But I do feel like I have free will, but maybe that is an illusion as well.
Yeah, but is that your ego having free will, or your brain, or your soul? I mean, it's actually quite a complex question when you really break it down.
Yeah, I think there's levels to it, because I feel like the higher self version of me had the free will to choose to live and come have this experience. And then I have free will on an ego level, which I think is more of an illusion. But yeah, it really is complex. It's one of those things that I just don't understand, among many things.
Maybe some things we're not supposed to understand.
Yes, I completely agree with you there. The other thought that you made me think of was when you were talking about the dualities, like the balance, the yin yang. When it comes to lucid dreaming, do you think that there are people out there or who have intentions of using lucid dreaming to learn something negative or toxic, or, use lucid dreaming for malicious intent or to plot something?
It's a good question, actually. I think there must be, right? Because if you think of lucid dreaming as like money, in my opinion, it just amplifies what's already there. So let's say if you have these negative personality traits and then you become rich, you're just going to do more of the same bad things. In the same way as let's say if you have intentions of doing something bad and then you learn how to lucid dream, the first thing you're going to do is practice doing that bad thing in the lucid dream. So I think it just amplifies what's already there. It's kind of like the skill itself is neutral, and it just gives you a space to do what you want.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It really is what you make of it,
I was just going to say, I had this debate the other day on Discord with a bunch of lucid dreamers, and the debate was, do you think it's bad or good to cause somebody harm intentionally in a lucid dream? In terms of your personal life, your brain, your mind, is it bad or good?
Yeah, I think so. I've thought about this actually. So our dream characters, there's two ways to look at it. Either the dream characters are a representation of me and my subconscious mind, in which case harming my dream characters would be harming some aspect of myself. The second way to look at it is, some dream characters might be their own conscious sentient beings that exist regardless of you dreaming them. in which case harming them would be like harming another person, like in waking life. And of course, like good and bad is all relative. But I think that for the most part, I always tell people that I like to show love and compassion for the dream characters, because it's not so much about like, are they really real, but it's about like the energy you're putting out there. I think, like you said, it's that intention. If we have intentions to harm something, whether it's ourselves or others, I think that that can have an effect on your psyche. And, you know, if you believe in karma or something, that's one thing. You know, in terms of the dream itself, it might turn into a nightmare, and like negative energy, I've found, like can change the direction of the dream. So it might just be an unpleasant experience, and nightmares can definitely affect the psyche. So yeah, I think if anything, you're just hurting yourself and potentially hurting whatever dream characters are. So I would just advise people to have positive intentions. Not to say I've never killed people in a lucid dream. I have killed people in a lucid dream, but not like with the intention of harming them, just lucid fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much my perspective as well. That's what I said in the Discord. It caused a bit of an argument though, because some people really felt that it's almost like they're right to be able to harm people in a lucid dream. And I said, well, that's more of a reflection of yourself than anything else. Like, there's probably some underlying thing that you need to have a look at, some kind of trauma, some kind of wound, or something's not right. You know, if a human wants to harm another human, even if it's in a dream, or if it's like, if there's no consequences, so to say, I still don't think that's good. I mean, obviously I've done it in lucid dreams. We all have, you know, you're in a lucid dream, you're having a battle with some dragon or something. But I think that's different to intentionally going into a lucid dream, specifically looking for somebody. And yeah, so interesting to get your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, exactly. I actually, one of my mentors and dream friends, he had a workshop with like Stephen LeBerg in like the 90s. And he told me the story about one of his students that wanted to learn lucid dreaming to practice being a flight pilot so he could like practice dropping bombs or nukes or something like that. You know, he was kind of like, didn't want to work with the guy because he was like, I like to align with people who have good intentions of learning lucid dreaming, because like you said, you can use it for anything. But I do believe that, you know, what goes around comes around. You know, the energy you put out there affects your experience. So yeah, it's good to just have positive intentions.
Yeah, of course. Even if somebody did not believe in something like karma, you know, it kind of happens anyway. And you see this you literally see this, like if somebody's always negative and complaining about stuff, there'll always be something else for them to complain about. There'll always be like they'll attract negative experiences to them. And you literally, I see this all the time with people I know. The people that are negative in their mindset have more negative experiences objectively than someone who is positive all the time. And especially when it's a choice, like you can decide to be positive or negative. Surely you would rather have good experiences than bad ones. I mean, most people would, right?
The other thing that I think would be cool to ask you is, you said you do like meditation and other types of spiritual practices. How does that like connect to your dream practice? Because I know it's kind of like, they're all kind of related in my head, like meditation, astral projection, lucid dreaming. How do you kind of incorporate it all?
Yeah, so the way I understand it is that in physical reality, the ego is a tool which the brain can use to kind of navigate the world and make sense of all the chaos and all the different stimuli that we're getting every second of the day. Whereas in a dream, the ego can kind of get in the way. And so in my opinion, the point of meditation is just to dissolve or kind of still the ego, at least just for a minute, to give yourself a chance to actually experience your true self, your consciousness, not the thoughts or the words inside your head, but the observer of those thoughts. That's the true you. So when I meditate, it's more just to get back, almost like a resetting, to get back to my true state. And then in the dream, it reflects in another way, because the more I meditate, the more I'm able to focus in the dream. So I find my dreams last longer. I can be more focused and, you know, direct in what I want to do. I don't get distracted as much. And really, the benefits in a dream from meditation is just one of many benefits. The main benefits I find from meditation is just complete lack of stress. I'm almost never stressed and anxious and worried. and I'm also much more able to focus on what I'm doing. Whether that's working or reading, being in the present moment, or whatever it is. My attention span is much better as a result of meditating. How do you find it? Like, what benefits have you found?
Definitely agree. I think meditation has helped me a lot in terms of that, stress relieving, just setting the stage for my day. And for me, it's helped a lot with mindfulness, which is a big thing for me with dreaming. So I think it kind of has helped me practice becoming lucid, really try to be present and in the moment, focus on my senses, that kind of stuff. And I try to do it in the mornings. When I started doing meditation, like I would get lucid more often and I would try to meditate in my dreams, which I found to be really cool. So
tell me more about meditating in your dreams, because I've also done that and it was a very strange experience.
Really? What happened when you did it?
Well, it was like this intense awareness that it's so much deeper than when I meditate in waking life. It's almost like there's no barriers. There's literally just straight into the deepest meditation ever.
Yeah, for me, it was interesting. I've only tried it a few times, and both times are kind of different. I was out in an outside dreamscape, but both times, like as soon as I started to try to do it, like the dream just started to become much more vivid and like come alive in like a really interesting way. Yeah, I felt like I was like breathing into the dream, and like every breath that I took kind of like changed the dream in a way. It's really hard to explain, but it was definitely like an interesting meditation experience. And I would say for me, it was like different than meditating in waking life, because I was really like observing and looking to see what would happen, and had like all these kind of like, not expectations, but just observing what would happen, versus in waking life, I would just, just let it be. So I definitely found it to be different. I would say I have to try it a little bit more often before I really say what it's like. I guess I kind of want to close off by asking you if there's anything you're called to give advice on regarding like lucid dreaming for people that are interested in it, and also for the people that are more advanced within lucid dreaming. Yeah, any like main takeaways or tips from your experience that you found really, really helpful?
For me personally, it's just to be aware of the fact, or aware of the idea at least, you don't have to believe it at first, that waking life is not this completely separate thing to lucid dreaming. They are kind of very much the same thing. Like the way the lucid dream works, the way you can guide that through your intention and through what you focus on, is exactly the same thing in waking life. And this is where we get into like manifestation, being able to guide and direct your own life. But in my experience, it literally is the same thing. Like what you focus on, you will get. And I've seen this so strongly over the last 3 years, especially, where you have people who are focused on fear and negativity, and all they experience is more of the same thing. And then on the other hand, you have people focused on growth, positivity, and love, and they just experience more of that. So I would say the biggest thing I would want to share is just to see waking life as another type of lucid dream where you are in control of it and you can guide your experience into what you want to actually have, versus just being a victim and just letting things happen to you. And yeah, so that was quite a big shift for me when I realized that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's interesting how the same way in a dream we can practice gaining control and shifting the way we want the dream to go when we become lucid. It's kind of like the same becoming lucid in your waking life, taking control, doing the things you want to do. And it's not as instant as in a dream. I think a lot of people forget to realize that it's in waking life, there's a lag period of having to implement the work and manifest things, but I think it's a continuous spectrum. Like the Tibetan Buddhists, dream workers used to say that the lucid dream awareness begins with waking life awareness. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. You mentioned manifestation. So can you tell me a little bit about how can you use your dreams to actually manifest real goals, like financial goals, growth, solving problems? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, so this is another rabbit hole, but I'll try and keep it as concise as possible. In my experience and research, it's almost entirely about emotion. So emotion seems to be the language of the divine matrix. And it literally in the book, The Divine Matrix, he talks about this. But basically, what you emotionally focus on is what you will experience more of. So it's more about just using the lucid dream to simulate the experience you want to have, and then really diving into the emotion of it. Let's say if you want money. Most times people don't actually want money, they want freedom. So focus really intensely on the freedom, and of doing what you want to do with your life. Let's say if you're really passionate about snowboarding, that's really what you want the money for, is to be able to snowboard all day. So have a lucid dream where you simulate snowboarding and you really go into the emotions and you feel the adrenaline as you go down the mountain or whatever it is. I've never done snowboarding, so I don't know what it's like. And try and bring that emotional reaction back to the waking life, and then really just sit with that. And that will magnetize that experience to you, you know? So whatever it is you want to do, just stimulate a strong emotion in the dream.
Super cool. Makes sense. The emotion kind of attracts thoughts, which, you know, little by little starts to attract the physical manifestation of what you're trying to bring. You know, it takes time. It takes also implementing it into your waking life. And we have a lot of barriers as well, like physical, socioeconomic barriers that, you know, play a role in like challenges to manifesting. But yeah, I think working with your dreams is a really good place to start visualizing and putting into action what you want to, and experimenting what you want to manifest. You mentioned it in the beginning, but what are your links, your YouTubes? Where can people find you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, sure. So if people want to find out more about me and my systems for lucid dreaming, I have, you know, my YouTube Lucid Dreaming Experience. That's the main place I post, or my website, howtolucid.com. But if you want just to get started, or if you want to practice my system for lucid dreaming, which it's been refined to be a very effective way of having reliable lucid dreams. You know, if there's any barriers, if you've been struggling, this is, in my opinion, very effective. I actually have a free kind of PDF thing that I put together for you guys, which is if you go to howtolucid.com/gift, you'll be able to kind of download the PDF and see a little free video thing and practice the system there. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. I do really love your content. I will say, like, when I started reading about lucid dreaming a few years back, I feel like you were kind of one of the first people to really start talking about it and spreading the word. So I think that's really super cool that you've been doing it for so long and now it's kind of getting more popular.
Thanks. Yeah, I hope it gets more popular. I hope more people learn about it and reaches a much bigger audience.